Hi guys, Yakto here. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the Tiger 1 Ausführung H1, or the Panzerkampfwagen 6 Tiger Ausführung H1 to be exact. And I hope that the sound won't be interrupted all too much by the working crew changing tiles on my roof as we speak. I hope you'll be able to live with that. In this tank spotlight we'll have a look at the Tiger, and I'll talk a little bit to you about the development process of the tank and how it is to play in War Thunder as of today. So let's start off by having a little bit of a look at the armor. By the way, this is a camo pattern that I downloaded from, can't remember what it's called, but War Thunder Live it is called. I'll put a link in the video description for you guys, so if you want this camo pattern for your tank, you can download it from there. So yeah, let's have a look at the armor. This tank, when it came out, was known for its ruggedness and its ability to take punishment on the battlefield, and the great armor of the tank. As you can see here, the low glacis is about 150 millimeters of effective thickness. You got 102 millimeters here on the glacis of the tank, or the upper glacis of the tank. As it is now, it seems like the vision slit and the machine gun port isn't a weak spot, but I think it is in game. We'll have to test that out when opportunity presents itself. And you have a gun mantlet of substantial thickness, 140 millimeters, 110 on the sides. If you want to knock out a Tiger tank, a commander's hatch shot would be a good idea, especially if you're using the 122 millimeter gun on the IS-2 tanks. I would most definitely go for a normal armor piercing shot right here. If you can't hit this, you might aim for the machine gun port or the vision slit port here, or the coaxial machine gun right here. That might be a weak spot. If you don't have that opportunity, or let's say you're in a T-34 tank, any kind of T-34 tank that isn't using the 85 millimeter tank gun, I would have to do as the T-34 drivers did. Go around it and try to hit this area right between the tracks and the mud guards and the side armor here, right here. If you hit here, you have only 64 millimeters of effective thickness on the armor, and I guess you can get through this. It's non-sloped as well. You can't really see that here, but it is. Oh yeah, if you look at this this side here, this is the edge of the hull armor from the side. So let's have a look at the X-ray. You can see here that a shot in the side of the tank will probably, if you hit the hull here, will hit the ammo, and that will ignite the ammo and blow the tank up. If you hit further on down here in the back, you will hit either engine, radiator or fuel tanks. And if you go for a turret shot, you will hit crewmen such as the loader, commander and gunner here. You might knock out the tank gun. Also want to try to hit the tank low in the hull if you're facing it from the front, because if you hit this part of the tank, you will cause a fire in the transmission, and that will spread throughout the tank and probably knock it out. The machine gun port here that I mentioned earlier will knock out the machine gunner and possibly even the loader back here. But it won't knock out the tank, but it will seriously cripple it. A tank without the loader reloads a lot slower. But if given the front shot opportunity, I would probably go for this optic slit here. If I hit through that, I will knock out the driver, the gunner, as well as probably the commander back there, and I might also hit the engine. And yeah, that will be the end of the Tiger, if I penetrate the armor, that is. So let's have a look at some gameplay, and I'll tell you a bit about the development of this tank and why it came to be one of the most legendary tanks on the battlefield during World War II. So, the Tiger tank. Yeah, although one can argue that Tiger 1 was Germany's first heavy tank, it really wasn't. There had been several attempts to build a heavy tank before that, and even the Panzer IV was actually called a heavy tank by its time standards. But by today's standards, you can safely say that the Tiger 1 was the first heavy tank to be built by the Germans for the German army and the Wehrmacht. However, they actually had some heavy tanks before that. They designed prototypes for a heavy tank, and the first one was made in 1937, and it was called Durchbruchswagen DW1. It more or less looked like a Panzerkampfwagen 3 chassis combined with a Panzerkampfwagen 4 turret, and it wasn't really good for anything other than to break through a line. Eventually the project was just scrapped in 1941. It had two fin armor, and the Germans decided to move on to different projects, since the German had some intelligence pointing towards that the French had some heavy tanks called Char B, as well as a medium tank called Soma S-35 that were heavier and had better guns than any of the German tanks had in the Wehrmacht at the time. So that was a problem. However, due to poor tactics, poor tank doctrines adopted by the French, the panzers of the German army actually succeeded to win the Battle of France due to the fact that they could actually surg Char B tanks who operated alone or in pairs, whereas the German panzers had lots of tanks in one platoon or company moving up together and covering one another. So that was a big difference. However, they ran into trouble when they faced British Matilda Mark IIs around Arras, the town of Arras in France in 1940. They found out none of their anti-tank guns or tank guns could actually beat the armor of the Matilda Mark II. So as a last lifeline, they actually used the Flak 38 88mm AAA gun as an anti-tank gun, and they managed to knock out the Matildas that the British had at the last minute of the battle. But only after the Matilda Mark IIs had penetrated the German lines and caused havoc on a grand scale. So that was a bit of a rude awakening for the Germans. So Henschel and Son Industries was given the task to develop a heavier tank, and the tank prototype that they chose to make was called VK3601H. It was a slightly heavier version of a medium tank with a Krupp Works turret, and it was designed to use a 75mm long-barreled anti-tank gun. And they actually built a few of this prototype, and it never saw service though, since new info came from the Eastern Front this time that they actually needed the 88 gun on a tank to be able to fight the Russians. So the project was scrapped, and they used a few of the manufactured turrets in a static defense role on the Atlantic Wall. Given the new intel from the Eastern Front, where German tanks encountered T-34s and KV-1s and 2 heavy tanks, there was a pressure on the German tank manufacturers to develop a new heavy tank with at the latest by 1942 in June. But when it became apparent that the T-34 was a main battle tank that the Germans would face in huge quantities on the Eastern Front, they moved up the final date to Hitler's birthday in April 1942. This gave the Henschel and the Porsche tank manufacturers less than 1 year to come up with a viable prototype for the German Tiger I. At the showcase, the Henschel tank was the only tank of the two to be able to traverse the tank more than 17 degrees without problems. The Porsche version engine started burning when they did a roll test where they drove the tank straight forward in a line. And after that the test matter was settled. So the Henschel prototype was picked as the new Tiger I. However, Porsche, while being confident in winning with his prototype, he had already built 100 chassis for his upcoming Tiger tank. So the decision was made after the meeting that his chassis would become a new heavy tank destroyer, and it would be fitted with the longer 88 L71 gun. The tank destroyer was later called Ferdinand, and it's also in the game. And it doesn't really look like a Tiger, but if you look at it closely you can see that it's actually a Tiger chassis, or was meant to be a Tiger chassis. So the Henschel prototype was also easier to produce, and it wasn't as complex as the Porsche tank, so that was also a factor as to why they chose the Henschel Tiger. And that it was easy to mass produce is a lie, however. There were only 1,347 Tigers built during the whole war. So that's a lot less than the production number of some of the Allied tanks that were built during the war. Being a German tank, the Tiger I was actually quite revolutionary of its own time. It had interlocking road wheels on the tracks that made the tank's weight dispersion along the tracks a lot better than the previous tanks. And obviously it had a much better gun than the other tanks had before it, so that was also a huge improvement, as well as thick armor that would take a lot of punishment, and it could bounce almost any shell that the Allies fired at it. That was also new because all of the German tanks before the Tiger weren't all that able to take hits from the M4 Sherman or the KV-1 or the T-34. At this time, most of the medium German tanks were in desperate need of upgrades in armament as well as armor. After the Tiger had been introduced on the fronts, it would see service until the end of the war, or until they were in one way or another put out of service. The Tiger saw fighting, and mostly and often heavy fighting, on all the fronts where the Germans fought the Allies, and that was in Africa, Italy, in Western Europe, and in Russia from March 1943 and onwards. And many of Germany's highest scoring tank aces all drove or were commanders on Tiger tank. When it first saw service, it was the most heavily armored tank on the field, and it carried the gun that could knock out any enemy tank at ranges of 1500 meters or above, and no other tank had been able to do that before, and this transformed the battlefield into a long-range sniping battle. Before that, engagement had been taking place on much shorter ranges. This put fear into Allied tankers, since they had to come up very close, within, I would say, maybe 200 meters to be able to penetrate any weak spot on the front, or like 200 meters to be able to get up on the side and put the shot in on the side plate of the tank. At ranges above that, the Tiger was more or less impervious to enemy fire, while it could knock out or penetrate any Allied tank at 1500 meters or above. It was very common that it opened fire at, let's say, 2 kilometers away at the Sherman tank, and it would hurt it or render it unfit for combat. So that was the birth of the legend behind the Tiger. So, opinion time. What do I think about the Tiger now in the game? Since the last patch, it had actually gotten a proper damage model. It does actually have a gun mantlet now, which it didn't have before. So that made the Tiger very squishy, and you weren't even safe if you were in a hold down position and only showing the enemy your turret. That was actually a worse position than had you shown the whole tank to the enemy, because if you get hit, you get hit in the turret, and that will knock out your tank. Nowadays, since they've fixed the damage model, I think the Tiger is a very good tank. I've been playing it a lot in realistic battles and as well as simulator battles, and it's pretty good. In simulator battles you tend to survive the whole game like I have been doing now, only if you drive carefully and you think about what you're doing. But in realistic battles you tend to be able to take out a few tanks, maybe 4 or 5 tanks in the beginning of the game, and after that you get knocked out by a bomber or someone who's taking out revenge on you, so beware of that. But it's a beast in simulator battles and I like it a lot, and I can see myself playing this tank a lot in the future, since I like tier or rank 3 fighters on the German side, so I don't mind getting bombed out. So that was all for me now, and I hope you have enjoyed this video and found it at least somewhat entertaining and worthwhile of your time. So I'll see you guys around, and have a good evening.